And then I guess you mentioned prenups, right?
Yes.
And they're like a hot topic. And it's so interesting because, occasionally I'll see a video on TikTok or Instagram about prenups. And then you go to the comments section. And I always feel like a lot of people are going to say prenups are if the person wants to do a prenup, that's a bad idea. Like there's no trust. But then there's a whole other group of people is like, that's the most trust is to sit down with your spouse or whatever, who you're going to get married, and then kind of have to disclose all this stuff and really think about the future when you start.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I understand both sides.
Yeah.
Both sides do have valid arguments. Prenuptial agreements, though, also can lessen litigation because there's clear, unequivocal terms of how the marital estate will be distributed. You can't waive the child support, you can't waive temporary alimony and temporary attorney's fees. So there are certain things that the court still lets you litigate, but it really lessens your litigation because going in, okay, if this doesn't work out, this is how we're going to distribute the estate. This is going to be separate property. This is going to be marital property. And it kind of gives you more of a guideline of how you need to settle your case.
Sure.
If there is a divorce.
Well, this is interesting because now I'm putting you in the hot seat. Like, do you recommend for clients, like if they came to you ahead of time, like as a family law attorney, and they said, hey, I'm getting married, my husband wants my wife wants to have a prenup, do you say good idea or do you say bad idea?
I say great idea.
Great idea.
I
Okay.
do.
Tell me why. Why?
Well, as a litigator, I see how much wreckage can happen when you're left to the laws that our legislators have provided to us. The law is ever changing, it's ever evolving, and sometimes it's not always favorable to your position. So in a prenuptial agreement, you have a lot of power to determine how you want this to potentially resolve for yourself. Yeah. So you can protect your premarital assets, premarital real estate, your future earnings that we're discussing. Let's say you're a personal injury attorney and you don't want to make not all your income marital, but let's say any verdicts or anything that you think is above a certain number, you want to keep separate. You can delineate that in your agreement. Otherwise, let's say you make $1 million settlement. Now that $1 million is marital. Yeah. So it just helps kind of give you parameters and guidelines. So when you do file for divorce, you're not saying, well, I want all of this, and then you're litigating, well, are they entitled to this? What does the statute say? How does the law apply? And the districts are all different on different things too. So it depends on where you file, where you're residing. So you would think Florida law would be uniform, but it's not.
It's not, yeah. No. And like you said, it's evolving, and you're really relying on the legislature, which sometimes is not going to, outline the best course for a particular couple. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So how often? Well, this was another thing I guess I'm curious about. If a client came to you and they say, or someone came to you and they're like, my spouse wants to get this prenup, and they say I should speak to their lawyer and we should all have the same lawyer. What do you think in that situation?
That is inappropriate. So it's not ethical to ever represent two parties that could be adverse to one another. Let's say we agree with every single term. This is exactly what we both want. I still would have an ethical obligation to represent one of the parties, and then they advise the other party that they have a right to an attorney of their own choosing to review this agreed prenuptial agreement, because the last thing you want, one, is a bar complaint saying that you represented them adversely against one another, although they were in agreement. And then two, you don't want the party that, wants to get a divorce or is not necessarily getting the best footing from the prenuptial and the divorce to say that as the attorney, you forced and coerced them to sign this agreement because you were truly representing the other party, even though you were representing both of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard that. It's like if you are in the position or you're faced with the situation that you're going to do a prenup, it's very interesting dynamic. Each of the couple should have their own lawyer to be able to advise them and give and really look out for their best interest.
Absolutely. And that's how it's handled. I've never done a prenuptial agreement without an opposing attorney on the other side, because you need someone that, one, knows the law, two, that can be, as you mentioned, an advocate for their rights. Let's say you're pushing to be very protective of let's say marital income, and then the opposing attorney says, well, we don't find that fair because Florida law would say it's 50-50. So instead of it being 100% separate property, let's do 30% or 40%. You can do anything that's contrary to the law as long as it's not illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think it's so interesting because it becomes between the couple, like this bargaining, and you're represented by lawyers, and you're like in love. Right?
You're bargaining your love.
And you're gonna be getting married, and then you got this whole future. But it is interesting because marriage is this. It's the long term. It's a contract, and it's both parties are bringing something to the table, and I think it's very interesting that from a family law attorney, prenup is extremely important because. Yes. And listen, obviously, we're all hoping that the couple lasts forever and until death do you part. But things happen, right? Life changes, things happen, and it is. I think it's like in any area of the law, the lawyer would advise you. You'd say, "Hey, protect yourself, and look out for the future."
Yes,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're becoming more common. They have less stigma.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing, interestingly enough, a lot of younger couples doing this because, I mean, younger people are getting married more frequently than older people.
Sure.
So it's become more accepted, just like it's becoming more accepted for people to have children outside of marriage. Yeah. It's just one of these newer phenomenons and part of our culture now that, rappers sing about it. It's very common.
That's why I thought, because I'm telling you, it's like my age, you know what I mean? As I'm getting older, it's like in my mind, when I see these prenup TikTok or whatever, in my mind, I'm like, oh, everyone's gonna be like, that person doesn't love you, but the stigma, it's completely changed. The view of it, the different generation thinks, hey, that's an important thing to have, and you get to have everything out in the open, and then you really truly love each other because you're actually planning for these things.
Yeah, and you're marrying for love because you're not marrying to gain some financial gain or to get your claws into some trust or assets that would technically maybe not even be yours legally under the law. But if there is not a prenuptial agreement, there's a lot of gray area and ways that you can convert non-marital separate property to marital property. So without these prenuptial agreements, you can expose yourself to maybe someone that isn't marrying you for love, and then they're taking advantage of a situation to where they can gain financially upon a divorce.
This is a very, very informative podcast today. I'm telling you, it's like really, really like useful information for people to be listening and understand that the stigma is not there anymore, that it's important to have, and that it protects yourself. How often do you see prenuptial agreements like being contested, like the validity of what's in it? Does it happen often? I always thought it was like fraught with like risk, but does it happen often, or generally they're kind of enforced?
People do contest it. So it's a very high burden. You have to prove, duress, coercion. It's not so easy just to say that, he was overreaching and these terms are more favorable to the husband than me. Yeah. You have to really prove, like I was speaking on previously, that an attorney forced you to sign something, or it's the day before the wedding and you're presented with this and everyone's flown in to the Bahamas for your wedding, and the husband says, well, if you don't sign this, we're not getting married. So you have different circumstances that could give some validity to a challenge of a prenuptial agreement, but they're difficult to set aside.
I feel like when you brought that up, like that, like day before the wedding thing, is there a case law in Florida about that? It sounds like it definitely sounds like a fact pattern that you would read in a case that went on appeal.
Yes.
And is that one of the factors that if there's this stress or this undue burden,
undue duress?
Really?
Yeah, and coercion. And also fraud. There can be set aside, let's say you weren't being truthful in what your separate property was or what your assets and liabilities were, and then you're having someone sign to assume something or to waive something, and it's filled with fraud. You could say, well, I didn't sign this knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. This is completely, it was based on fraud.
Yeah, it was misrepresented to me. I relied on the misrepresentation, and now I'm hurt.
And I would never have signed it had I had known he had $1 million debt that now I'm responsible for, or something that, may have been slipped in intentionally on a basis of fraud.
I feel like Florida would be a state that would be in favor of enforcing the prenuptial agreement. Am I right? Like
Yes.
it's more like let's presume that it's valid, and then you really need to show something that it's invalid.
Absolutely. It's a very, very, very high standard. Contract law applies for the most part. There is a statute that's specific to prenuptial agreements, and then there's case law that has stemmed from the application of that statute. So it is definitely a very, very, very high task and burden as the attorney to try to challenge a prenuptial agreement. You also can bifurcate that in the beginning of your divorce. So you can litigate the validity of the prenuptial agreement on the onset, so you're not obviously the trajectory of the whole case stems from the ruling.
Yeah.
So you can say if it's invalidated, then obviously Florida law would apply.
Yeah.
If it's upheld, then the prenuptial agreement needs to be applied. So they litigate that on the front end.
And there has to be, and the reason why some of these things like the validity gets challenged or there's litigation that at some point arises is because maybe some spouse feels times changed. We were together for so long. Back then I signed this. And so they're stuck with it, right?
Well, they can always do what's called a postnuptial agreement while married. So let's say you've been married 20 years and you find your prenuptial agreement to no longer be fair or just, or the law has changed where if you didn't have this prenuptial agreement, you would have a much better result in court if you just had the Florida law apply. So you could negotiate with your spouse to say, well, I've been married to you for 20 years. I would like for us to modify our prenuptial agreement and do a postnuptial agreement, which has the same contract. You need to have the acceptance, consideration, witnesses, et cetera. It would be the same formality of your prenuptial agreement. So then the postnuptial agreement would basically take the prenuptial's place.
How often, I feel like it wouldn't happen often, but how often do you see couples that have been together for a long time bring that to the attention of a lawyer to get changed, the postnuptial agreement? I feel like it wouldn't be too often. No?
I see it when couples are on the verge of a divorce where they're maybe considering filing or someone has filed, and then they start negotiating, well, if I'm going to stay in this marriage with you, I need things to be different, or I need the terms of our agreement to be different because I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly or that agreement's fair to me. So I've seen it. It's not frequent, but I see it when people are kind of either reconciling separations, reconciling after filing divorces, because they're like, if I'm going to dismiss my divorce action, I want something in place that says what's going to happen if we do file again.
If we end up, I mean, and I guess there must be a leverage dynamic that's happening in that situation where there must be one spouse, whoever's trying to file for divorce or whatever, but they're using that leverage because they think, hey, if I go through with this, there's going to be a bad deal for me. And then you have the spouse that kind of wants to keep it together, and they're almost in a position where they want to bargain still.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't think that spouse who's going to make out okay would want to change it. You'd want to keep it.
It's always something happened in the marriage that gives someone leverage. Maybe there was infidelity or financial infidelity, when someone's wasting money or has a gambling addiction or something that, really shook the foundation of the marriage to where that agreement no longer seems fair. That first agreement.
Really?
Yeah.
And then they're in the position though.
To bargain. They say, if you cheated on me, I had 3 of your children, let's just say, and that prenuptial agreement is no longer fair. If you want me to stay with you and work on this marriage, I need you to do the following things. And
then two lawyers get together, and they help negotiate this deal, write up a new contract, and now they're in a better space. At least one of the spouses, for at a minimum, is going to be in a better space.
Yeah, it depends on who has the leverage, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. I mean,
it's not every day you see this. This is just
no. I know. I think it'd be a rare thing. Like I said,
it is. It's happened in my practice.
You see it all.